Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was son of Shinigami, part 1. Subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. The Shinigami were watching the light show in the sky above them. Not even a few minutes ago, the Soul Society was put on high alert due to an invasion by a group of Ryoka. The captains of the 13 court guard squads were watching the spectacle, while one captain was staring at it, reminded of what happened 6 years ago. Soifin stared at the bright light watching as it sparked and glowed so much like the technique of a single man so long ago. She reached and clutched her hand over her heart. Taicho. Soifin was broken out of her trance. Taicho, what is wrong? Amida Marichio looked at his Taicho in worry. Soifin blinked several times. It was nothing at all. Soifin looked at her lieutenant with a steeled expression. Have all 2nd Division troops ready for combat. If those Ryoka get through, then we need to capture them quickly. The last thing that we need to deal with at the moment is chaos now. Marichio stood straight. Hi Taicho. Amida turned towards the 2nd Division members next to him. You heard Soifin. Taicho move out. They ran off, but suddenly stopped when they saw the massive light split apart into separate directions. Soifin cursed, damn new strategy. She turned to Amida, follow 11th Division, try to locate the Ryoka now. The 2nd Division scattered into the 4 directions towards the place where they saw the lights go, while Soifin let a single tear fall from her eye. Minamoto-kun, she wiped away her tears, cursing her nostalgic tendencies, and then headed off to locate the Ryoka. Time skip 8 hours later. Soifin sighed as her and her squad entered the barracks. They had not found any trace of the Ryoka. And unlike the 4th Division, they did not carry energy pills around at all times, so her squad needed rest. And today had been incredibly stressful for her. She had to leave the squad group several times. That light created by the Ryoka brought up so many memories she had tried to suppress for years, and everything she saw after that reminded her so much of things she had hoped to forget. Marichio saw the state his captain was in. Taicho, are you alright? She inhaled deeply and spoke in a cold voice, but Marichio heard the emotional strain in it. Lieutenant, I wish to be alone for a few hours. Please let all squad members know that I am to be left alone. Should they disturb me, I will kill them personally. She walked away from Amida and headed towards her quarters while Marichio thought to himself, what the hell is up with the captain? He sighed to himself and walked towards the sleeping quarters for the rest of the squad to deliver the message. But Soifin walked through the barracks trying to hold on in the coming years. She swept past every one of her subordinates and refused to make eye contact with anyone. She saw the entrance to her quarters and sprinted for it. She slammed open the door and closed it shut behind her and then broke into sobs. She curled herself into a ball and simply laid there crying, all the while thinking to herself, Minamoto-kun, my Sachi, why did you have to die? I have lost everyone I ever cared for. Why did I have to lose you both? She sobbed into the night. For an hour she just laid there crying. When she finally stopped crying, she simply lay there, tracing the floor with her index fingers, mumbling to herself questions of why and how. After an hour of doing this, she gently pushed herself up, but because of the physical strain on her body from patrolling and crying, it was rather difficult. She finally managed to push herself up. She looked at her closet and walked towards it. When she got there, she reached for her captain's Haori and removed it, gently folding it in even parts. She then removed her Zanpakuto and placed it on her bedside. She turned towards the mirror in her room and began to remove her Mitsukido uniform. First she removed the upper portions and gently began to reveal her skin. And showing a few scars on her body from when she trained with Yuruchi, she revealed her medium-sized breasts. Both were perking up from the cold in the room. She then removed her lower half of the uniform, revealing a pair of black panties. She looked at her body and began to trace the scars on her body. On her upper left shoulder were 5 slash marks from an animal Yuruchi had sparred with her in cat form and accidentally cut too deep on her back. She traced a scar she got from fighting an extremely powerful hollow. She had barely made it out of there alive, and the last scar, the one going across her stomach, the one that was a permanent reminder of what she almost had. The scar was the result of a cesarean section from the one and only child she ever had. They had to cut out the child because the strain from the birthing would have killed them, both had they not. She let more tears flow from her face and wiped them away. She reached for the closet and opened it, revealing several night kimonos. She reached for a blue one with see-through lace. It was always her favorite. After all, it was the only thing she had left from her husband. She placed on the kimono and walked over to another door. She sighed and opened it, revealing a shrine. She kneeled down and began to light candles. As she prayed, the shrine held a single picture of a man with blonde spiky hair, electric blue eyes, and a winning smile. He was wearing a white cloak with flames licking the bottom of it. It looked much like her captain's Haori minus a few differences. The man in the photo was her now deceased husband Namikaze Minato. She looked at the picture and then at the wedding band in front of it. She reached for it and looked at what was engraved on the band. To my loving Bumblebee, my beautiful wife, I will love you even beyond death. Soifin could not take it anymore. She fell over and dropped the wedding band and let a few tears fall. She did not notice 1 year land on the gem of the wedding band until the gem glowed bright. Same time, Konoha was silent tonight. The sky was dark. And there were shooting stars in the sky. If one were to look at it and not hear the screams of pain from one blonde-haired Jinchuriki, they would think the village was paradise. But it was not paradise, not for Uzumaki Naruto, not when the blonde was running for his life from a mob. Naruto was cut and bruised. He had been thrown out of the orphanage when he was 3. And he had been living on the street since then. He survived by scrounging around in garbage and trash, trying to find things that would give him some measure of sustenance. But today he was so hungry, he had not found anything edible in the last 3 weeks. And he felt so weak that he could barely move, so he took a bold move. And decided that he would try to swipe a piece of bread from a food teller. He had simply walked past the stand when the problem started. The food teller saw him coming and yelled, "Thief, the demon has stolen my goods, thief." He was then attacked by a small group of villagers. He had managed to avoid the more painful blows, but he was injured enough that it was hard for him to escape. Naruto turned down an alley and ran to the other side of it. He saw that there was nobody there. He smiled, thinking he was home free until an Anbu wearing a lizard mask and had black hair landed in front of him. He stopped as the man began to perform hand seals. Suiton. Suryuiden no jutsu. From the nearby puddles on the ground, a dragon of water rose up and charged at Naruto. Naruto was knocked over and slammed into the ground in pain. As he tumbled, a necklace was revealed. It was a simple silver chain necklace. And had a hornet as the medallion was glowing. Naruto pushed himself up and tried to run, but found that the mob had finally caught up to him. The leader of the mob shouted, "Excellent work, Shisui, thanks to you we can finish off the demon once and for all." Naruto cowered as the mob advanced on him, unaware that his cries for help would soon be answered. Back with Soifin. Soifin saw the glow of her wedding band and she was quivering. Impossible how the band would only light up if Minato's "Oh God, oh Kami-sama." She grabbed the band and spoke a chant. Suddenly the ring lit up and she saw something that shocked her to no end. Her son, the child born from the love between her and Minato, was in fact alive. She saw that Naruto's eyes were wide with fear. "Sachi, what's wrong?" She then saw a beer bottle smash into his face, cutting it up. "No." She saw the mob advance on him and her eyes widened with fury. "How dare they, how dare they, how dare they, how dare they harm my Sachi." She released a massive amount of spiritual pressure that was felt throughout the barracks and throughout the other side of Sarate. Hiruchi stopped on the roof she was on as she felt the spiritual pressure coming down on top of the entire city. This spiritual pressure is Soifin's, but how did it get so powerful? She looked in the direction of 2nd Division barracks as she felt the pressure crushing down around her. Back with Soifin. Soifin grabbed her Zanpakuto and jumped through the window. Not even a second later, her squad came running into her room to see her jump out the window. Amida cursed, "Damn it, all units, follow Captain Soifin now." The members of Squad 2 followed Amida, who was trying and failing to catch up with Soifin. Soifin jumped over the buildings and headed directly for the Shinigami. "I will not let them hurt my children ever again." She ran through hand seals and threw an energy bolt at the controls for the Shinigami. The gate glowed and Soifin ran through them. Her squad stopped in front of the gates. One of the squad members ran towards the gates. "Wait." The squad member turned around to see Amida looking at him. "Soifin Taicho is heading somewhere, and by the feel of her spiritual pressure, we would only be a nuisance to her." The squad looked at the still open Shinigami, wondering what was so important that their captain went in, releasing enough to be felt all the way to Rukongai. But Naruto had been beaten into unconsciousness, and the mob was surrounding him. A single ninja walked up and poured a vat of gasoline over the blonde and then took out a match. "Burn in hell, demon." The shinobi were about to light the match when a great light shined above their heads. They all looked up to see a paper door open and a light wash out, and then they saw a woman wearing a katana around her waist and wearing a partially see-through kimono. The man stared lecherously at the extremely beautiful woman. "Hey, looky here, boys, it seems Kami-sama has sent us a lovely angel for us to play with for killing the demon. Let's not disappoint her." The man would have continued his tirade had the woman not yelled out. Pado 31. Shakaho. She thrust her palm out and an orb of crimson light that was sparking off massive amounts of spiritual pressure formed in her hand before she fired it at the mob group, killing all who were hit by it, which included about 20 civilians and 3 shinobi. She landed where her attack hit and quickly ripped out her katana. Hey ahh. She attacked the civilians brutally and sliced them open, spilling their internal organs over the ground. A shinobi ran at her, but she simply sidestepped him before grabbing the back of his head and brutally smashing his face into the concrete wall. She finished off the last of the mob before she turned to the profusely bleeding Naruto. She wasted no time and ran over to him. "My Sachi, thank Kami-sama you are alive." She placed her arms around Naruto and gently lifted him up. At the end of the alley, Sarutobi and a group of Anbu arrived. They were shocked to see the alley littered in blood and dead bodies, but they were even more shocked to see the woman, especially the three Anbu wearing a cat, rat, and snake mask. "Soifin-sama." They did not have time to ask, as Soifin looked at the still open Shinigami and jumped towards it. Sarutobi ran to stop her, but he was not as fast as he used to be. Sarutobi watched as the Shinigami began to close, but was surprised when it stopped closing. "Whatever that door is, we need our top forces to go in after Naruto. I will not fail Minato's last wish." He turned towards his shinobi. "Everyone, locate all members of Anbu unit Musayoru. Have all members ready for S-rank combat. No one is exempt. Go." A resounding group of highs was heard as the Anbu scattered to locate the members via special flare. The Anbu circled up and went through hand seals and then slammed their hands onto the ground. "Ninpo. Musayoru." A tangent of seals spread out from their palms and then shot into the sky. The light quickly transformed into the symbol for Musayoru, a 6-point star with a single crescent moon in the middle of the star. All around the village civilians were disappearing and using Shunshin to arrive at the place the Hokage was standing. The woman with crimson red hair saw the Musayoru symbol and narrowed her green eyes. "Looks like I can finally let loose after 6 years." She disappeared in a whirlpool Shunshin and appeared before the Sandame. Sandame looked at the group. "Attention, an unknown person has kidnapped Uzumaki Naruto. We must go and retrieve him. Come on." Sarutobi tore off his cloak and revealed his battle gear. He jumped up and leapt towards the Shinigami, his Anbu following close behind. The red-haired woman, who was wearing an Oni mask, was still stuck. Did he say Uzumaki? She had no time to ponder this, as she jumped into the Shinigami. Uzumaki Kushina would get her answers soon enough. Back in Sirte, over 2 hours had passed in Sirte, for some reason, the human world and Hueco Mundo all had various different time zones to the point where there could be several years difference between the worlds. No one was able to figure it out, so no one was able to get the pattern in. Amida stared at the Shinigami his captain had gone into. "What is taking her so long? She should have come out by now." He was about to keep waiting when he saw an orange-haired girl with an impressive bust wearing clothes that clearly belonged in the human world. "Hey, Arioka captured her now." The squad ran at her. She yelled something into the alley behind her. Amida could have sworn he heard something like "Jiru or Mary" or something like that, but he paid it no mind when the girl was brought before him. "Well, looky here, it seems our squad has captured Arioka, and a rather cute one at that." He grinned at her. "Oh, don't worry. Unlike other Soul Reapers, we do not take advantage of our position, so you won't be humiliated per se." He reached for her. "However, I am sure our captain will have fun interrogating you if you." Before he could continue, the Shinigami flashed as Soifin came running out carrying a bundle. "Out of my way." She ran through the group, knocking over several of her squad members. She ran towards the center of the Sirte, not even bothering to look back. Marichio looked at the rest of the squad. "Come one, bring the Ryoka, we have to follow the captain now." 2nd Division followed the orders and headed after Soifin, while Orihim was carried like a burlap sack by one of the larger members of the squad. She looked at the Sirte. It was beautiful if you didn't see the trail of blood. What she looked to see the trail of blood and saw that it lessened, but she saw the trail of blood coming from whatever it was that Soifin was holding. She suddenly felt something wet on her face. She reached up and felt it. It was a liquid, but it was also thick. She looked at her hand and nearly wretched. It was blood. Soifin saw that Naruto's wound was bleeding and tore off a piece of her kimono. She did not care if it was a gift from Minato. She would forever be turning in her grave if she ever allowed her son to die, regardless of her husband. She saw that they were near the barracks of the 4th Division and crashed right through the doors, knocking over the medics who were in the room. The woman who had long black braids that crossed over her chest turned around and her eyes widened at the sight of the person in Soifin's arms. "Soifin, what happened?" As there she was silenced when Soifin ran up to her and shoved Naruto into her arms, staining her haori with blood. "Heal him now." Soifin gave Unohana a look that left no room for argument. "I will heal him, but why are you so?" Her question was cut off as Soifin fell to her knees, tears falling from her face. Soifin barely managed to choke out, Please heal him, save me." She could not continue as she was too overwhelmed to do anything more than cry. Unohana sighed. Isane, a white-haired girl that was built very well with a very cute bust, came out of a nearby door. "Please bring this child to the medical wing, and hurry." The woman known as Isane saw the state of the child and screamed to the rest of the medics. "All of you, front and center, we have a level 5 emergency surgery required. All available surgeons follow me." She grabbed Naruto and headed towards the surgery ward. Soifin sat down on a nearby bench while the rest of her squad entered the barracks. Soifin Taicho, one of her subordinates, said, "What is going on? Who was the young boy you were carrying?" Soifin looked at her subordinate and sighed. "That boy, the one I carried in my arms, as I should have done so long ago, is my Sachi." "What? You mean to tell me that Soifin is a mother? Everyone turned to see that Amida was hyperventilating at the information. When the hell did this happen? Soifin sighed as she looked at the ground. It's a long story. It all started when I went to a new world to locate sudden appearances of hollow energy. You remember I went missing for 4 years if you do. Flashback. Soifin ducked to avoid a swipe from the claw of a large hollow. The hollow looked very humanoid and had a turtle skull-shaped mask. The hollow chuckled, "Oh, how delightful, some delicious food for me." It jumped at her with its mouth wide open. Pado 31. Shakaho. A red blast of energy came out of her palm and tore into the hollow, dispersing it. She fell over and began to realize she had been tasked by the head captain to explore this world, a place where hollows seemed to be few in number, but were far more powerful. That turtle-like hollow was the third one she has faced, and it part on Jillian class. She got up and groaned, "Damn it, this is pathetic. I am a member of the Fawn family, trained to be an assassin. And I am the captain of the 2nd Division, and I am weakened from fighting only 3 hollows." She got up to get moving to her next destination, but had to jump out of the way when a massive set of claws tore into the ground around her. She got up and looked at what had attacked her to find another hollow. But this one was different. It was clearly not as weak to be considered an average hollow, but it seemed to be Fira-like one. But there was no mistake, this was a true Ajuchas. The Ajuchas was about twice the size of a polar bear in the real world. In place of fur, it had white bone-like armor all over its body. The creature's teeth were pure white, with large amounts of crimson and green, most likely leftovers from meals. Its claws were black and sharp. The creature's eyes, however, they continuously shifted between yellow and red. It looked at Soifin and roared. It ran at her and slashed at her. She got cut across her chest. It was not a mortal wound, but it sure as hell hurt. The hollow snarled at her as it opened its mouth, a brown ball of energy forming. Soifin was quick to act and moved out of the way right as a Zero tore through the landscape around her. She cringed as the hollow's eyes went from golden to blood crimson. The eyes began to drip a red fluid as it began to stalk over to her, but it stopped and suddenly ran away. Soifin pushed herself up and groaned, "Damn, that wound was painful." She looked to where the claws hit and found that it damaged her personal Shinigami creation unit. "Damn, looks like I better call HQ." She pulled out her soul pager. Well, Soifin snapped around to see 3 men wearing metal headbands with slash marks through Tem, grinning at her. "Looks like we found another one that looks like we can burn a bit of, boys." The 3 grinned as they suddenly began to move their hands in intricate motions. Before she could move, she saw them all inhale and made a blowing motion while saying, "Kaiten. Kakakyu no Jutsu." She was shocked to see balls of flame coming at her, but she was shocked to see what appeared to be a wall of water appear in front of her. Suddenly 2 individuals, a male with blonde spiky hair, a green flak jacket vest, and carrying a knife with 3 points in each hand, as well as a woman with crimson red hair, a sleek figure, and carrying an extremely dark-colored katana, probably from a lack of cleaning off the blood. The man turned in her direction. She was about to turn around to see if someone else was behind her. "Hey, lady with the white haori." Her eyes widened as she looked at the man. "You alright?" She looked at the man, too surprised to answer. "He can see me. How does he have a high amount of spiritual pressure?" She was broken from her thoughts when the woman yelled, "Hey, Minato, get your head in the game and harassing those damn traitors." The woman began to twirl her katana as the blonde-haired man, who Soifin assumed was Minato, turned towards the battlefield. "Yes, Kushina-senpai." He threw the kunai at the 3 men and suddenly a flash of light appeared. And all 3 men were dead. Soifin's eyes widened in shock. The men were there a second ago and now they were gone. Minato turned to Soifin, "So you alright?" Between the shock of someone here being able to see her and the sight she just saw, she did the last thing anyone who knew Soifin would have done. She fainted. Time skip. Minato was watching Soifin sleep, the steady fall and rise of her chest. He looked at her features. She seemed to be built for combat, if the muscle tone was anything to go by. He reached out and traced the muscles on her arm. "Minato." Minato jumped up from his seat and turned to see Kushina, giving him a mock glare. "What have I told you about ogling women you just met?" Minato looked down and grumbled, "Don't ogle them until you get a chance to know them." "I remember what you said, Kushina-senpai." He turned towards Soifin. "So what do you think that thing she fought was?" Kushina leaned against the wall and sighed. "I am not sure, but in my clan back in Yuzu no Kuni there were legends of monsters with white masks that fed on souls. I am not too sure, but this seems to be the case. For some reason, the creatures dissipate when killed, so nobody has ever been able to examine a body." She sighed. Ugh. The 2 shinobi turned to see Soifin waking up. Kushina walked over and knelt by her bed. "Hey, girl, you alright?" Soifin turned to the 2 and her eyes widened. "Miss Minato started, we would like to know what reason you have for being here. If your uniform is anything to go by, you clearly are not from one of the elemental countries, so who are you? And don't bother lying to us. I am the best interrogator in my division, so start talking." Soifin panicked and reached for her Zanpakuto to find it missing. "Looking for this?" She turned and saw Kushina holding her zanpakuto. You get it back once you answer my questions. So start talking. Soifin glared at Kushina and then turned her attention to her zanpakuto. What do I do if I tell them who I really am? Things could turn bad. But I need my zanpakuto. Damn. Soifin sighed and spoke. Alright, my name is Soifin, born Fan Shaolin of the Fan family. 3 hours later. And that is my story. She looked up to see the reactions of the two, to see their eyes the size of dinner plates. Kushina looked at her zanpakuto. Damn, and I thought my sword was dangerous. Here you go. She passed the zanpakuto to Soifin. Thank you. Now if you will excuse me, I have to get back to Sirte. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cell phone. Minato and Kushina looked at it in curiosity. Soifin flipped it open, then cursed, damn it, it's out of power. She placed the phone in her pocket. Looks like I am stuck here for a while. She got up and began to stretch. Suddenly the doors were opened and an Anbu came in. Minato-senpai, Kushina-senpai, the council had been called together for urgent reasons and they said you are to bring your new friend. The Anbu quickly vanished via Shunshin. They know about her, how we were the only ones here unless. Minato looked around and saw a vent. He walked up to it and removed the grate. He cursed. The vent had traces of what appeared to be rat prints, and if he knew one thing, it's that Root carried a rat summoning contract. How else could they have found out? He got up and headed towards the door. Come on, we mustn't keep the council waiting. The three walked out of the tent. Soifin was at the ready in case she needed to fight. This is the worst time to have no power in my soul pager. Council room. Minato, Kushina and Soifin entered the council room to see all the clan heads, the lead civilian merchants, and the elders all sitting around a large table. Sarutobi looked up. Ah, Minato, Kushina. I see that the three of you have arrived. I am sure you are wondering why we have called you here. Actually yes, we would also like to know how exactly you all found out about Soifin so damn quickly when I made sure that no one had seen her. Minato released a small amount of killing intent that actually scared most of the clan elders. Danzo stood up. Mind your tongue, Minato. Do not forget that we, as the council, have privileges that allow us to do as we please, so long as it is for the good of the village. Kushina ripped out her katana and pointed it at Danzo's throat. Keep talking, old man, or I will cut off what is left of your body. She released some killing intent to make her point. Anyways, everybody turned to Tsume. Now that all of us are here, we can start the meeting. Everybody nodded as Minato took his place in the Namikaze seat. Namikaze. Minato, we of the council have read through various reports on your successes and have found that you are quite possibly the most able shinobi to date. As such, we wish to name you our new yondaime. What? Minato stood up and yelled, "Are-you serious? I am yondaime?" Everybody nodded their heads. Yes. Alright, okay, yeah, oh yeah. Minato began dancing in his seat, causing everyone in the room to sweat drop. Anyways, the next order of business is what to do with young Ms. here. Everybody saw the woman edge her hand closer to her zanpakuto. Danzo stood up. I propose that she be placed in my division. Surely a being with such power could. Danzo was silenced by a roar from Minato. Oh no, Danzo, no way in hell am I going to let you use her to your sick ends. Minato pulled out a tri-pronged kunai. Fugaku stood up. Why not? At the very least she could be capable of breeding powerful soldiers. He leered at Soifin, who began to unconsciously shiver. Fugaku, if you ever make a comment like that again, I will skin Jayukin so badly that your grandchildren will feel it. Hyuga Hiashi stood and yelled at the Uchiha clan head. This is getting nowhere, Sandaime-sama. I believe that it would be best if she were simply put on probation for the time she is here. As soon as she is able to contact her allies she will be leaving. Sarutobi nodded his head. Very well, Soifin will be kept under protection. Meanwhile, Minato, you will be inaugurated as the yondaime in 3 years' time. Sarutobi stood up and said, this council is adjourned. The council stood and headed towards the exit. Minato, Kushina and Soifin were the only ones left in the council room. Well, I guess we better get you someplace to stay. I know, Kushina yelled. You can stay at my place. She grabbed Soifin's hand and dragged her out of the council room. Minato followed suit, grasping his head while groaning. Green, this is perfect. He sighed and walked out of the council chambers. Later on, Kushina, Minato and Soifin were sitting in a ramen stand and all three of them had about 10 bowls next to them. The young Tucci was grinning like a madman. With this much money, I will be able to start my own restaurant, yes. He continued to stir the broth and noodles as Kushina and Soifin conversed. So, you are the last in your clan and you are the head of your division. She began to chew down on some more ramen while Soifin answered. Pretty much, man, this stuff is good. She gobbled down another bowl of ramen. Yep, when me and Mina-chan here, she said while pinching Minato's cheek. First we had a ramen eating contest. I kicked his ass and ever since then he has called me senpai. Soifin looked at Minato with a raised eyebrow. Is this true? Minato nodded his head as his mouth was full of ramen noodles. Yep, it's true, ever since we have been great friends, although the rumors going around that he and I are dating are extremely annoying. she huffed as she glared at a nearby civilian who seemed to be talking about them. Soifin giggled. She may be stuck here for a while, but after what she has seen it can't be all that bad. Time skip 8 months later. Kushina, Minato, and Soifin were at a beach after they had secured a victory for Konoha and Kurigakure. They had managed to defeat the Sandai Mizukage and had instated Yugura, the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi, to lead. Soifin was wearing a one-piece bathing suit that perfectly complemented her features. Kushina was wearing a green two-piece, and Minato was wearing a simple bathing suit. The three were throwing a frisbee around, albeit poorly, especially since Soifin and Minato were ogling each other when the other was not looking. Over the last 3 months, the two have grown fond of each other. Kushina was grinning off to the side. Time for plan matchmaker. She walked past Soifin, who was ogling Minato, and accidentally tripped her. She fell over as Minato was turning around, and the two crashed into each other in a very compromising condition. Soifin was straddling Minato, while Minato had his arms around her waist. When he tried to catch himself, the two looked at each other and proceeded to blush like tomatoes. Minato stuttered, "Soifin-chan, I." He was silenced when Soifin did something he never expected her to do. She kissed him right on the lips. Minato's eyes widened as Soifin connected her lips with his. She separated for breath and placed her hand on Minato's face. "Minamoto-kun," she rested her head on his chest and said, I love you." Minato looked at Soifin in shock, but it quickly turned to happiness. "Soifin-chan, I love you too." He pulled her chin up to face him and their lips connected. Kushina was off to the side grinning. Operation Matchmaker success. Time skipped 2 years, and 4 months later. Minato stood on top of the Hokage Tower wearing his new uniform with his wife Soifin at his side. The two had gotten married a week ago with only a few people attending due to the fact that they wanted to keep it secret. He walked towards the balcony and spoke up, "People of Konohagakure no Sado. I am pleased to announce that I, Namikaze Minato, have been named your Yondaime Hokage." The crow cheered as they threw many objects in the air, ranging from streamers to their own hats. Minato smiled and returned inside. Kushina was at the side grinning, "Well, Mina-chan, it seems you finally got your dream." Minato smiled at Kushina and walked over to his wife. "Yes, I got my dream," and kissed Soifin's head. "And more." He kissed Soifin as she grabbed the back of his head. Kushina rolled her eyes. "Oh boy." Time skip. Kushina was babbling incoherently as she heard what Minato said. "Are you serious, Minato?" And Soifin smiled as the Shinigami captain patted her belly, which was noticeably a bit bigger. "Yes, I am serious, Kushina. In 6 months me and Soifin will have a child and we want you to be the godmother. Jiraiya has already been nominated as the godfather and we believe you would be the best influence on our child." Kushina began to stammer while Soifin smiled. "Yes, I could not think of a better person to be the godmother, so please Kushina, will you accept?" Kushina sighed as she looked at Minato. "You two are going to keep asking me until I agree, aren't you?" The two nodded, causing her to smirk. "Alright, we'll keep an eye on your little cherub." The three continued with conversations as to when the baby would be born and other things. Soifin smiled when she first came here. She could not wait to go home and now she doesn't want to leave. She looked at her belly and smiled. "My little Naru-chan, you have made mommy so happy," she sighed to herself as she placed her head on her husband's shoulder, smiling. 6 months later. Soifin was screaming in pain as she was giving birth. She was losing blood and fast. The doctor in charge cursed, "Son of a bitch, if we don't do something both of them will be dead. We need to perform a cesarean section now." He pulled out a scalpel and looked at Soifin. "Soifin-sama, I am sorry, but we need to perform a cesarean section. This will hurt." Before Soifin could say anything, the doctor placed the scalpel in her flesh and proceeded to open an entrance to her womb. Soifin screamed in pain. Why of all days did the Kyuubi have to attack today on the day of her child's birth? The doctor finally removed the scalpel and gently used medicine to keep Soifin alive. He sighed as he gently pulled out a crying blonde-haired baby. Soifin was panting and cringing in pain and the other mednins immediately began to heal up her wound. She looked to the side and grabbed a small chain with an amulet on the end and said, My baby G, give me my baby." The doctor complied and placed Naruto gently in her arms. She smiled as she placed the necklace around his neck. "You will never have to take this necklace off, it will grow, as you do my son." She nuzzled her son's cheek and sighed. Minato appeared in a golden flash. "I am so sorry." He fell over and began to cry. Soifin pushed herself up. The mednins had managed to heal all her wounds, but she was still tired. "What is wrong?" Minato wrapped Soifin in a hug. "Kyuubi is too strong." I sobbed even harder. "I have to seal him, and our son is the only one who can contain him. I am so sorry." He cried as he held onto Soifin tighter. Soifin caressed the back of his head. "Minamoto-kun, I don't care if the Kyuubi is sealed inside our son. I will always protect him no matter what." Minato picked himself up and took Naruto from her, whispering apologies. He jumped out the window and headed towards the battle. Soifin was about to get back in bed. But stopped when she heard the splatter of blood and the slashing of flesh from outside. She grabbed her Zanpakuto and broke down the door. She was appalled at the sight. The entire floor was caked in blood and dead bodies. She looked around, awed. She turned to where she heard the noise and saw a doctor get bitten in half, but it was what bit the doctor in half that shocked her. It was the same hollow she fought just before Minato saved her life. She snarled as she saw the bear-like hollow look at her. She quickly pulled out her Zanpakuto, stinging all enemies to death. Suzumabachi, her Zanpakuto glowed a golden color as it wrapped around her hand, forming into a golden gauntlet with a long stinger on her middle finger. The bear Ajuchas roared loudly and attacked Soifin. She was grabbed by the Ajuchas in its jaws, but she managed to reinforce chakra around her body to avoid being impaled. She slashed Suzumabachi across the Ajucha's eye. The bear hollow quickly let go of her and grabbed its eye. A butterfly-like tattoo revealed itself and began to bleed a bit. Soifin fell to the ground and cringed. Oh yeah, fighting an Ajucha's right after giving birth, yeah, not my best idea. She jumped away from a claw strike coming towards her by the bear hollow. She jumped back and delivered a kick directly to the hollow's chin and sent its head careening backwards. She delivered a kick to the hollow's throat and slashed across it with Suzumabachi. The hollow roared in anger and pain as its eyes began to glow like crimson fire as blood seemed to pour from them. It opened its mouth and let loose a massive crimson zero that tore apart the halls and part of the building. Soifin jumped out of the way and avoided the strike, but she did not expect the Ajuchas to swing around wildly, attacking and dismantling everything in sight while firing zero after zero from its mouth. What is with this thing? Kenpachi is less destructive than this thing. She jumped out and ran at the Ajuchas. Die. She was about to hit one of the death marks when it suddenly disappeared. Damn, those stupid marks only stay on for a few minutes, still shit. She was about to try and make another death mark but was swatted away by the giant Ajuchas. Soifin tried to get up but collapsed as she heard the cries of a baby's screams as she heard the tearing of flesh. Then flashback. After that, I scoured the village. I discovered my husband had died sealing the demon into our son, and when I went to ask Sarutobi, he told me that my son had died by some giant white monster. I left after I was able to open a Shinigami. Ever since then, I had become what I am now, cold, ruthless, completely without emotions. Amida wiped away his tears. Along with a good portion of the squad, how could they not cry from that story? Amida looked at Soifin. We understand, but Soifin looked at Amida. If Sarutobi lied to you, then I assure you he is going to pay. Soifin smiled as the rest of her squad nodded. Orihime was silently crying to herself. Her son was taken from her and she finds him bleeding and brutalizing. This must be painful for her. She looked up at Soifin, but everyone turned their heads as the door to the medical wing opened, with Isane stepping out, a forlorn expression on her face. Soifin jumped from her chair and ran towards Isane. So can I see my son now? When can I take him home? Can he eat my cooking? Isane placed her hand on Soifin's shoulder and let out a choked sob. Soifin Taicho, I am afraid that your son won't last the night. Soifin's eyes widened before she began to chuckle. Haha, okay, enough with the joking. So how is my son? Isane grabbed Soifin's shoulders and said, I am not joking, I am sorry, but by midnight tonight, your son is most likely going to be dead. Soifin collapsed. Isane was known for one thing, and that was when she delivered news. And she placed both her hands on their shoulders. She was not joking ever. Soifin began to whimper. No, Okami, no. She reared her head back and screamed. No, I just got him back, I can't lose him again. No. Soifin began to twitch and spasm. The rest of the squad had to grab her as she began to thrash around. Orihime saw the distress and then she remembered her powers. It's the only shot we have. Orihime broke free of the 2nd Division member and ran towards Isane. Miss, I might be able to save him. Please give me a chance. Isane looked at Orihime. She sighed. Alright, but I doubt that there is anything you can do. Isane said while she slowly cried. Orihime ran into the room. Soifin saw this and stopped struggling, watching in anticipation as Orihime brought her hands in front of her. Shun Rika, her hairpins lit up and began to fly around. 6 little fairy-like individuals formed. The 6 fairy-like beings flew around. A feminine blonde-haired, one wearing a red piece of clothing, came forwards with a smile on its face. Orihime, what can we do for you? Orihime pointed towards Naruto. When the 6 saw the condition his body was in, they gasped. His body was torn open, his blood was flowing everywhere. And it looked like parts of his body were being attacked by the stitching alone. We need to heal him quickly. The blonde-haired sprite nodded and turned to a sprite that was wearing an abnormally large dress with flower-like markings on it. Ready? The sprite nodded her head. Orihime sighed. Soten kissin'. I reject. The 2 created a field of energy and hovered over the blonde. Everyone watched as Orihime had a look of determination on her face. Soifin was looking with so much vigor that she refused to close or blink. Orihime growled to herself. I will not stop, not until he is safe. she focused on the wounds more. Aisane was about to tell her to stop, that she was wasting her efforts when her eyes widened at what was happening. Naruto's wounds, even the massive gash in his body, were beginning to heal and close up. Everyone edged closer, not believing what they were seeing. Soifin was crying as she prayed, "Please don't leave me, Okami, please don't take him from me again." Orihime focused completely on the wound and the wound finally closed. She fell backwards but managed to keep herself from falling over. Aisane managed to catch her before she completely fell over. Unohana had watched the spectacle and was astounded, amazing, not even I could have healed those wounds. She looked at Orihime with pride, such a magnificent healer. Soifin was released from the holds of the other squad members. She slowly walked towards her son. She looked at him and began to trace the whisker marks. She turned to Orihime. Orihime watched as Soifin walked towards her and jumped towards her, wrapping her in a hug as she sobbed into her shoulder. Thank you, Soifin continued this as she tightened the hug. Orihime rubbed the distraught Shinigami's back. Meanwhile, the rest of the squads of both 4th and 2nd Division smiled. It wasn't every day you saw a Shinigami mother and child reunite. Crash! Everybody suddenly turned their heads towards where they heard the crash. They saw a young Shinigami member of the 4th Division. He seemed rather small, but Unohana knew him as Yamada Hinataro, 7th seed of the 4th Division. He panted as he stopped in front of Unohana. Unohana Taicho, Fukatecho Sasuke Chijiro of the 1st Division, arrived with 2 more seated officers. He says he is under orders from the Sateicho himself. Hinataro was shoved out of the way when a member of the 1st Division came up from behind him. Out of our way, we have orders from the Sateicho. The 1st Division member looked up at Unohana. By orders of the Sateicho, the Ryoka in this building was to be brought before him immediately. Unohana was about to reply when Soifin answered for her. Tell the old geezer that she is under my protection. She turned back to her son. You bitch, how dare you insult the Sateicho, especially when he was gracious enough to allow your son to live. Soifin slowly turned towards the Shinigami. What did you just say? The Shinigami was either really brave or really stupid as he chose to answer her. Are you deaf? I just said that the Sateicho was gracious enough to allow your son to live when he could have simply killed it and protected it from an enemy. He smirked, thinking he had broken her will, misinterpreting her body's shakes. So you mean to tell me that the Sateicho knew my son was alive and he never told me? The man snorted as Sasuke Chijiro and 1 more member of the 1st Division came around the corner, their eyes widening in horror. No, you damn fool. Chijiro was too late as Soifin held up her Zanpakuto. Sting all enemies to death. Suzumabachi. Her Zanpakuto became so quickly no one could see it. She rammed the stinger towards the Shinigami and buried the stinger in his heart, killing him instantly. Soifin turned towards the 1st Division members and released massive amounts of both killing intent and spiritual pressure. The 2 1st Division members were crushed by the force. As she walked towards them, Chijiro was trembling at the feeling. This is so powerful, not even the Sateicho can do this. Soifin grabbed Chijiro's throat and began to squeeze. Where is Yamamoto now? Chijiro began to choke as he answered. The Taicho, he is in the meeting hall with the other captains. Soifin threw Chijiro to the ground and walked towards the exit. The moment she got outside, she released all of her spiritual pressure and killing intent. You will suffer for this betrayal, Yamamoto. She leaped over the buildings and headed straight for the council chambers. Other side of Sarate, Iruchi suddenly stopped and turned her attention towards the middle of Sarate, feeling an aura that rivaled the head captain's. How this is so familiar, but how can Soifin have this much power? Iruchi turned towards the direction she felt the pressure and headed straight towards it. The Shinkamen gate. The Shinkamen was wide open, anyone could get through it, so it was no surprise really when over 20 masked individuals came through, being led by an old man in battle armor. The old man turned towards the group. Everyone fan out and find Naruto. Once you locate him, bring him back here, go. A resounding hi was heard before everyone sped off. Uzumaki Kushina sped off towards the center building in the middle of the city. If they were holding Naruto prisoner, then that was the likely place they would be, and if her assumptions were correct, then Saratobi might be retiring sooner than expected. Sateichu Yamamoto Genryusai Shijikuni was a very old member of the Sarate and Soul Society. After he had taken command of the Shinigami Corps, he had made a name for himself. He was known to be brilliant, ruthless, and abides by the laws of Soul Society, and showed no mercy to those who broke those rules. This was why at the moment he was twitching with aggravation that not 1, but 2 of his captains were late for the captains meeting that always occurred right after the crisis was made known, and Soifin and Unohana were late. He turned towards the captains. It would seem that the captains of the 2nd and 4th divisions are late. I want you to find them and bring them here, Kanam Sajin. The 2 nodded their heads and turned to leave the room. Sateichu Yamamoto turned his head towards the speaker. Aizen Sasuke, captain of the 5th division. Perhaps we should give them a few minutes, they must be working incredibly hard. Surely you can spare a few minutes. Yamamoto looked at Aizen. Aizen, if I gave a few minutes to one captain because they were busy, then all of my captains would be requesting extra time. I will not allow them a seconds extra because of simple matters. But Satacho Aizen was cut off by Byakuya. They must follow the law. That is the only way our society can prosper, for without law there is only chaos, and if we are to have others abide by our laws, we must first abide by them ourselves. Byakuya looked at Aizen, who sighed. I understand that, but in a crisis situation we must consider the workload that occurs from such an occurrence. I only ask to give them a few more minutes to. Aizen was cut off again, this time by Yamamoto. I do not care if it is a crisis situation, the fact of the matter is that they are late. And in their position, as Taichos, they are expected to be here on time, not a second late. I will not condone such actions from any of my captains. Am I clear about Aizen Taichu? Aizen sighed. Now Kanem, Sajin, bring Soifin Taicho and Unohana Taicho here. If they put up resistance then they are to be Yamamoto stopped, as an immense spiritual pressure. And an unknown force crushed down on top of them. Kanem and Sajin were pushed down to their knees, along with every other captain. Kenpachi, Jashiro, Shunsui and Yamamoto were the only ones able to remain standing, if only barely. Sajin forced himself up and wobbled a bit, but he was frozen as he felt the pressure. Yamamoto was grunting as he tried to keep himself standing, and his cane was barely helping. Such spiritual pressure, how? Suddenly the spiritual pressure spiked as they heard a loud feminine yell on the other side of the door to the captain's meeting, Yamamoto. The doors were hit with such force that they were thrown off of their hinges. The doors went flying towards the captains, who had just enough ability to move to avoid being crushed by them. Everyone looked to see the large cloud of smoke created by the door's destruction. As it dissipated it revealed a feminine figure. The person was Soifin, and she was pissed. She glared at Yamato and pulled up her Zanpakuto, string all enemies to death. Suzumabachi. Her Zanpakuto changed into Shikai, die. She ran towards Yamamoto, fully intending on running the stinger of her into his ancient heart. Yamamoto was so shocked by the spiritual pressure and the unknown energy that he was not able to move. I can't move. Soifin ran right at him. And, as soon as she hit the center of the room, she kicked the floor with enough force to send spiderweb cracks through it. Soifin snarled as she shot her Shikai out and aimed it for Yamamoto's heart. She was only a meter away from Yamamoto, Whoosh Xing Clang, and was not more than an inch away from him when her arms were grabbed by Sajin and her sword was stopped by Kenpachi. She growled in anger as she saw she was only an inch away from killing Yamamoto. No, this man will die for what he did to me. He will pay for denying me my son. She began to push herself forwards to try and at least put a death mark on him. Sajin was struggling. No, I cannot allow her to kill Yamamoto Urg, damn, she is strong. Sajin was struggling to hold back the enraged mother. Kenpachi was having no more ease. How can a weakling from the 2nd division be putting up this much of a fight? Oh, she would be fun to fight. He grinned murderously as he applied more pressure to push Soifin back. Soifin finally shouted, out of my way, Yamamoto will pay for what he has done to me. She directed a kick to Sajin's head, cracking it up the middle. She then used her spare hand and grabbed Kenpachi's sword. Kenpachi was about to slice through her hand when she used it to break his blade in half. Kenpachi was so shocked he did not see her foot coming at him until he felt it careen in between his eyes. She turned her attention to Yamamoto, die, and tackled him to the ground. Once he was lying on his back, she brought Suzumabachi up as she grabbed him by his throat. Kuroi Ken, black stinger. The stinger on her hand instantly turned black and began to release a dark. Be honored, you are the first person I have ever used this on, die you bastard. She threw her arm forward right towards Yamamoto's throat. Yamamoto saw her throw the hand forward and closed his eyes awaiting the piercing of flesh clang, but opened his eyes to see Shunsui, Yuki Take, and Kanem stopping her Kuroi Ken from running into his throat. Shunsui grabbed Soifin's arms and pulled her off the head captain. Now if Satacho was caught taking nude photos of you, I am sure we can resolve this civilly. Soifin kicked Shunsui in the balls for that comment, making his voice turn soprano, or maybe not. He fell over clutching his round tables as Soifin turned towards Yuki Take and Kanem, who were joined with Sajin and Kenpachi in getting in between her and the Satacho. Get out of my way. She pulled out Kuroi Ken once again and began to walk towards them. All 4 of them got out their Zanpakuto. Yuki Take chose to be the voice of reason. Soifin, I do not know why you wish to kill the head captain, but you are committing treason. Soifin glared at Yuki Take, and before anyone could even blink he was in the air being held by the front of his shirt. I will commit treason 1,000 times over if it means making that man pay for keeping my son away from me. What? Every last captain in the room screamed. The reactions of each captain varied. Toshiro was babbling like a drunken fool. Jin's eyes popped out of his sockets, revealing that they were red. Kanam's mouth hung wide open. Kenpachi was stuttering and repeatedly saying, Wahoo. Hand Byakuya was so wide-eyed that one would think they would soon fall out. Aizen let his glasses fall. Jashiro began to twitch. Shunsui snapped his fingers for not being able to tap that, and Sajin must have had some sort of reaction because he was slumped over, trying to keep his balance. What I did not know was that you had a son. He must be quite interesting. Everyone turned their heads to Kuritsuchi Mayuri, Taicho of the 12th, who was twiddling his fingers while having that same mad expression on his face, showing he had a few experiments in mind. Perhaps you can send him to me to see his natural inverness. Perhaps he could have developed some unique traits, especially since he was born a Shinigami's child. Soifin let go of Yukitake and pointed a Kuroikan at Mayuri and snarled out, If you even think about laying a hand on my son for your twisted experiments, I will kill you extremely painfully. She turned her attention back to the group blocking her from killing Yamamoto. Now move or I will send you all to hell with him. She began to release and Kai to make her point. Yamamoto stood, I kept your child away from you for legitimate reasons. Soifin snarled at him, then tell me what those reasons are and I may decide to let you live. She got into a stance, ready to attack the Sateicho at any moment. I do not need to divulge the reasons to Soifin threw him back with the force of the spiritual pressure. Now she focused her into the stinger and began to walk forwards. Yamamoto groaned as he got up. Fine, he stood up and looked at Soifin. I kept your son from you because he was a half-breed. We have no knowledge of what a half-breed could do to the Serite. And so I and the Central 46 chose to keep him hidden from you. This only seemed to anger Soifin and shocked Kamamura. He kept her son from her because he was different. Sajin immediately began to think back to how he was treated when he was a child. He hated the glares and the loneliness all because he was different. You kept my son from me because the man I fell in love with was a human. She walked forwards with more fervor. After Kyuubi attacked Konoha I went mad thinking he was dead. Sajin gasped when he heard the word Kyuubi come out of Soifin's mouth. It can't be. He looked at Soifin as she snarled at the head captain. He was also a Jinchuriki for that demon. That creature is stronger than 100 Vasto Lord. What do you think would happen if Kyuubi got free? Soifin glared at Yamamoto and snarled. Frankly, I don't give a shit. He is my son and I will make you suffer for keeping him away from me. Soifin was about to shoot herself towards Yamamoto and finish him. Wait. She stopped as Sajin yelled, Please, I wish to meet your son. Soifin looked confused. If what you say is true and that Kyuubi is sealed inside of your son, then he looked down and began to clench his fists. Soifin let her anger fall a bit and began to feel dizzy. Aizen and Jin managed to catch her before she fell over and her eyes were swirling from the power surge. Ooh, look, kittens with pretty bee wings are so cute. Soifin began to babble out as she finally cut off the enormous amount of power. Jin looked at the rest of the captains with that same creepy smile. Oh, don't be alarmed, she is merely suffering from a Reiatsu surge. She should be fine in a few minutes. 3 minutes later, Soifin was speaking coherently again, albeit she was having trouble standing, but she was alright. Thank you Jin Taicho, Aizen Taicho. Aizen smiled. Not a problem, Sadiq. The captains looked towards where the doors used to be and saw several Shinigami standing there. Sateicho, a larger group of Ryoka, have infiltrated the Serite. They are wearing white masks, but they are not hollows, they fight like a Shinigami would. And they are throwing the elements around, as if it was nothing. They are being led by an elderly man with an outfit similar to ours. Soifin's eyes widened. Anbu and Sarutobi, what are they doing here? She turned towards Sajin. Looks like we have to wait for you to meet my son. Sajin nodded his head as he walked out of the chambers, along with the rest of the captains, leaving only Soifin and Yamamoto. Yamamoto, once this crisis is finished, I am going to be having a few words with you. She walked out of the chambers, leaving the Sateicho. He collapsed on the floor and began to pant. I guess the old saying is true, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. In the Serite, Ishina ducked as a member of the 11th division slashed at her with his Zanpakuto. She backflipped and kicked him in the chin, sending him careening into 3 more Shinigami coming up the alley. She jumped on top of the building and performed hand signs. Suiton. Suryuiden no Jutsu. She opened a canteen that had various seals inscribed on it and opened the cap, spilling out gallons of water. The water quickly turned into a dragon of the substance and charged towards the upcoming Shinigami. She looked around and saw her fellow Anbu Musayoru attacking other Shinigami, although in her mind they were the enemy. She jumped down and turned towards the giant building in the center. That is where I will receive my answers. She jumped onto the wall and ran towards it, passing by an Anbu creating wood from the ground around him. Tenzo, or Yamato, as most people nicknamed him, was attacking a rather large Shinigami from the 11th division. He quickly performed a that created a wall of wood between him and the Shinigami. The Shinigami quickly cut through it and hacked at Tenzo. Enzo ducked under the strike and delivered a sweeping leg kick to the giant of a man and sent him toppling backwards. Enzo jumped on the wall and saw Musayoru Oni heading towards the giant building in the distance. This is going to be interesting. He ran towards his fellow Musayoru. Kushina saw the rest of the Musayoru surround her flanks and grinned, this is going to be one hell of a fight. She then saw Sarutobi attacking a dozen Shinigami and Sandaime quickly finished them off and joined their group. Musayoru Oni, what is our group status? Kushina quickly answered. No casualties, 3 injured with D-rank injuries can still continue. Sandaime nodded his head. But now let's find Naruto and get out of here. He jumped forward and performed hand signs, Kuchius no Jutsu. A puff of smoke later, and Enma was at his side. Sarutobi, what is it? Hiruzen looked at Enma. We are on a search and rescue mission in Enma, and we need your help. Enma snorted in a happy way. Well, that's great, I have needed the exercise. He transformed into a longbow staff. The group of 21 hardened shinobi jumped over a wall and went stock still at the side over it. Standing in front of them were over 100 Shinigami, all of them ready for combat. Kushina pulled out her katana and roared, Musayoru attack. The Anbu attacked while Sarutobi went through a set of hand signs, Kaiten. Karyuenden. He breathed out of his mouth and sent a massive dragon of fire from it. The dragon flew in fire and then went hurtling towards the awaiting Shinigami. They scattered off to avoid the blast, but were not expecting flames firing off from the impact. The Musayoru attacked the confused Shinigami and managed to take down several of them rather quickly. Kushina sliced at one, but was shocked when a long pole arm came in front of her and stopped the blade. Well, look at what we have here, it seems we get to fight another Ryoka, Yumichika. Kushina turned her head to see a bald man with red markings around his eyes, standing next to a very effeminate black-haired male she assumed. Oh yes, Ikaku. And I think we can defeat this one. He pulled out a scythe that quickly turned into several curved scythes, beautifully. The effeminate male sliced at Kushina, slicing off her mask. Ikaku ran at her with his long spear and ran it towards her direction. She slashed at the end of the spear and ran at Ikaku. Ikaku managed to dodge out of the way and punched her, but was shocked when she was replaced with a log. What? And suddenly felt immense pain when Kushina kicked him in the back of the head. Michiko looked at Kushina, you are truly beautiful, but can you defeat me beautifully? He attacked her with his Zanpakuto and managed to trim a few hairs. I don't think the removal of a few strands of hair ruins our beauty. Although you need to be more accurate with your strikes, I would hate to scar such a beautiful face. Kushina's sweat dropped on him. There are beauty models back home that are less feminine than you, and that is saying something. She jumped back to avoid Yumichika's weapon. Oh, you might like to see your home's beauty. If it is anything like you, it must be quite extravagant. Kushina grew a tick mark on her forehead. Are you hitting on me? Yumichika looked confused at this statement. Hitting on you? Why would I do that? I am merely stating your beauty as compared to the ugliness of others, although I must say your beauty far outshines the Ryoka I fought today, such an ugly pig. In his remembrance of the fight from earlier, he did not manage to avoid Kushina kicking him in the chin, several tick marks on her face. Would you knock that off? The village lunatic is not as creepy as you. Back in Konoha. Achu, oh my, someone must be talking about me in gratitude for including me in their conversation. I will run 100 laps around Konoha. And if I cannot do that, I will do 3,000 push-ups while making dango, and if I cannot do that, shut the fuck up, guy. Guy stopped his ranting when his fellow shinobi all ganged up and yelled at him. Back to Sarate. Michiko was frozen. He felt a trickle down his cheek. He touched where he felt the trickle was and found blood. You scratched my face, Kushina snorted. Well, no shit, Dumbus, don't you think you would get scratched in your line of work? You scratched my face. Yumichika began to tremble. Ikaku began to take steps back. You might want to run. Ikaku scurried back faster as the rest of Squad 11 backed off along with him. Prissy boy, you okay? She was about to ask again when Yumichika looked at her with a crazed look in his eyes and was foaming at the mouth. You fucking bitch, you fucking scratched my beautiful fucking face. I am going to kill you so badly that your death will make even one as beautiful as you look ugly. He pulled up his Zanpakuto, Ruriro Kujaku. His sickle-like Zanpakuto extended into vines of pure shocking all in the 11th division. Ikaku looked at the Zanpakuto. He has a Zanpakuto. He looked at Yumichika, whose eyes were widened with raw fury. Yumichika snarled at Kushina, die oh beautiful bitch. He swung his Zanpakuto and sent the vines towards Kushina. Kushina sliced the vines, but was shocked when they grew back twice as fast. Yumichika was foaming at the mouth while his eyes got a crazed look in them. Why do you not accept the beauty of your inevitable defeat, oh lovely bitch? Kushina jumped away from the vines as they smashed into the ground. Yumichika ran at her and swung his Zanpakuto at her. Kushina pulled out her katana and began to charge chakra through it. Yumichika snarled at her as he yelled out, Nenshu Kujaku. The vines caught aflame as they whisked around like a twirling of violent snakes. Kushina charged her chakra through her katana, Kei's no Yeba, and the blade was covered in wind chakra. The two swung their blades at each other. Yumichika's eyes were lit with fury, clearly not knowing exactly what he was doing. Kushina was focused on her opponent. And nothing else. Just as their blades were about to hit, clang, both of them were stopped by someone wearing a pink cloak. And a man with a white haori. Ishiro was stopping Yumichika from continuing his attack, and Shunsui was preventing Kushina from cutting Yumichika to bits. Ishiro grabbed Yumichika's shoulder and yelled, "Hey Asagawa, snap out of it now." The blind fury in the effeminate man's eyes disappeared and was replaced by a confused glance. While what happened, he looked at his hand and his eyes widened with terror. No, did he looked up and his unasked question was answered. The entire 11th squad was watching him hold his true Shikai, a Aikido-based Zanpakuto. Yumichika backed off and began looking around frantically. No. He turned towards the nearest wall and jumped over it. Ikaku saw Yumichika jump over the wall. Yumichika, wait. He was about to jump after him. Ikaku. The bald third seat turned his attention towards the speaker and found his captain looking where Yumichika had run. Leave him be. Ikaku growled. But Taicho Yumichika Kenpachi looked at Ikaku and snapped. Can handle himself. I will speak to him later. Ikaku turned his attention back to the Musayoru in the area. Now which one of you is the strongest? He got a murderous grin on his face as the Musayoru got ready. No wait. Kenpachi turned to see Soifin coming towards them with Sajin, Jin, Aizen, Kanam, Mayuri, Toshiro, Retsu. And Byakuya jumping into the area. They are not our enemies. Kenpachi growled before he reluctantly put his sword away. Soifin turned towards the group and her eyes widened at who she saw. Kushina. Kushina was slack-jawed when she saw Soifin. The two females walked towards each other and Kushina shouted, "Soifin, where the fuck have you been? After you disappeared 6 years ago I thought you were dead." Soifin looked at Kushina. "I am sorry, but after Hiruzen told me that my son had died." Sarutobi interrupted them. "I never told you he was dead. I went to look for you after the sealing and I found you missing." Soifin looked at Sarutobi. "But you came to my room when I was injured and told me straight to my face that my son was dead." The three began to argue until Toshiro lost it. Quite. Everyone looked at the young captain as he sighed. Now clearly something is going on here. And I think that we need to figure it out, but arguing with each other will not solve anything. The two shinobi and one looked down and grumbled. So everybody looked at Jin. "Since all of us are here, why don't we go meet your son?" Soifin squinted his eyes and sighed. "I guess we should, but..." She looked at all the Shinigami. "If even one of you tries to pull a fast one and hurt my son, I will kill you myself." Soifin turned towards the direction of the 4th division. Taicho. But turned around when she heard a loud call and saw all the lieutenants minus her own, Retsu's, and Yamamoto's. Renji ran up to Byakuya. "Kichiki Taicho, had I known you were in a fight I would have come earlier." Ian and Sentaro ran up to Jashiro. "Taicho. We apologize for being late, we will punish ourselves accordingly." The two then began to argue with each other to see who was more devoted to the captain. Momo painted, and as she got to Aizen, "Taicho forgave me. I was delayed." Aizen smiled and patted her head, letting her know it was okay. Ken-chan, Soi, but I got lost." Yuichiro began to curl up Kenpachi's haori and rested on his shoulder. Nanao walked calmly towards her captain. "Forgive me Taicho, I was unaware of the new attack." Shuhei stood before Kanam and saluted. Itsuzuman began to sprout apologies and asked to be allowed to kill himself, to which Sajin sighed in slight annoyance. Nemu bowed before Mayuri-sama, "Forgive me, I was delayed." Mayuri huffed and said he expected her to be on time from now on. Ranjiku ran towards Toshiro, Taicho, and glumped him between her breasts. Izuru walked towards Jin. "Taicho, forgive me for being delayed. Had I known." Jin cut him off, letting him know it was perfectly alright. Soifin grumbled to herself before she yelled, "Hey, if all of you wish to continue talking, fine, but I am going to check up on my son." "What?" The lieutenants had all yelled out at the announcement. Renji was slack-jawed and stammering. Kiin and Sentaro stopped their argument mid-pose, making them look like ballerinas. Momo began to sputter nonsense in random tangents. Nanao actually cursed, "What the fuck?" and began sputtering. Shuhei began to twitch like crazy. Tsuzuman jumped so high his glasses fell off. Nemu showed actual emotion with a wide-eyed expression and an open mouth while making simple ah noises. Ranjiku stopped hugging her captain and simply stared at Soifin, a blank look in her eyes. And Izuru fell over unconscious. Soifin queried an eyebrow at the group. "What is so surprising about having a kid?" The lieutenants, captains, and assorted Shinigami looked away, not wanting to make eye contact. "Bastards." She turned towards the 4th division. "Come on." She quickly jumped up and ran towards the building. Ikaku was about to follow here. Ikaku. He turned towards his Taicho. "Oh, check up on Yumichika. Kami knows he needs it." He jumped towards the 4th division while Yuichiro yelled out, "Good luck badly." For once he did not snap at her, he turned towards the direction Yumichika went and sprinted right for him. Ashiro was about to jump off when he noticed Ranjiku was still staring into space. Ranjiku, he began to wave his hand in front of her face. Ranjiku, he poked her forehead. She fell backwards a little and fell right towards the captain. Oh god, numph. The rest of his sentence was muffled out as Ranjiku's impressive bosom began to suffocate him. Jin looked at Izuru and sighed, perhaps I should think about better preparing him for such shocks. He grabbed Izuru and began to jump towards the 4th division. Meanwhile, Irichi made it to the steps of the center of Sirite. She was shocked to find that only Yamamoto was in the building, along with a few low-class Shinigami. Irichi looked around, trying to sense the other captains. She finally found it heading right towards her. Oh shit. She jumped away and headed off to find Ichigo and the others as Soifin and the rest of the captains and their lieutenants arrived along with her. She ran towards the direction of the 4th Division barracks and ran up the path towards it. The rest of the captains and lieutenants followed her quickly. She kicked open the door to the 4th Division barracks, forcing several nurses to run out of the way. She ran towards her son's room where Isane, Orihime, Amida, and the rest of her squad were waiting. She ran towards her son, who was steadily breathing. The rest of the group ran and they all filed in quickly, wanting to see the son of Sirite's Golden Hornet. Sarutobi, Kushina, Tenzo, and the rest of the Musayor ran in and began panting in the room trying to keep up with the Shinigami. Sarutobi and Kushina pushed past the other Shinigami and entered the room. Soifin began to caress her son's cheeks and cry. She whispered, "My baby, my precious child, I am so sorry." She ran her fingers through his hair and sighed to herself. Isane looked at Soifin. "Soifin, I just want to let you know that he could be asleep for a few days. I'm not sure when he will awaken, but..." Green Isane stopped talking as a groan came from Naruto's lips. He moved his hands to his eyes and began to rub at them. He opened his eyes to see all the Shinigami surrounding him with swords. Isane was at a loss for words. The injuries Naruto sustained would have kept Taicho in bed for a week and he just woke up from them in an hour. Soifin looked at her son. "My so. Ah." Naruto jumped off the bed and fell onto his back. He began to creep away from them. "No, stay away, I didn't do it. Please don't hurt me again." He hit the wall and began to panic, his eyes widened with terror. Soifin got up and walked over to Naruto. "Naruto, we are not going to hurt you, we just..." Naruto screamed as he ran to the corner of the room. "Lies, you're going to hurt me like all the others." Soifin's eyes widened and then turned to look at Sarutobi, who looked down in shame. Soifin began to tear up as she tried to walk over to her son. "Naruto, please, we aren't going to hurt you." She reached out towards Naruto. Naruto saw the window and shot towards it, but Soifin managed to grab his shirt and wrapped him in her arms, preventing him from escaping. "No, let me go, I want my Oji-san." He began to thrash and panic, trying to get out of her grip. The captains looked at this in shock. How bad was this kid's life that he reacted like this? Even Mayuri found himself wincing. Soifin began to sob uncontrollably. "My baby, please don't leave me, please don't leave me." She was sobbing so badly she never noticed Sarutobi walk up to them and kneel in front of Naruto. Naruto continued to thrash, tears spilling from his eyes. Naruto's eyes snapped open and saw his Oji-san in front of them. "Oh, Oji-san." Sarutobi saw Naruto still continue to struggle. "Naruto, please let me explain." Naruto continued to thrash as Soifin whimpered from emotional pain. "When you were born we thought that both of your parents had died, but it seems that your mother was deceived into thinking you were dead." Naruto's eyes widened. His mother was alive. "Your mother, Naruto, is the woman holding you in her arms." Naruto's eyes widened as he slowly stopped his thrashing and began looking between Soifin and Sarutobi. He finally looked down and slowly looked up at Soifin. "Kachan." Soifin stopped her crying as her eyes opened. Tears were still flowing from her face. She heard her son ask her if she was his Kachan. She nodded her head. "Kachan." Soifin nodded again and tears began to fall from Naruto's eyes. "Kasi-chan." Soifin whimpered as she nodded her head. "Kachan." Naruto wrapped his arms around her and sobbed into her shoulder. Soifin openly cried as she caressed her son's back. "Naruto, my Naruto." The two merely held each other in their arms. Mother and son were finally reunited. The rest of the captains and lieutenants were looking at this, each having various reactions. Denpachi smiled, thinking back on how alone he was and how alone this kid had to have been. Yuichiro was actually sniffling and using Kenpachi's Haori as a handkerchief. Byakuya looked away, being too reminded of the day he lost his beloved Hisana, and Renji was pushing away some tears. Retsu was smiling as a single tear fell from her eyes. Isane was trying and failing to hold her tears in. Shunsui was smiling while Nana was whimpering and crying a bit. Shunsui patted her shoulder to show that everything was alright. Sajin was smiling under his mask as he sniffed at Suzuman was crying and trying to look manly at the same time. Shuhei was smiling as he looked at the two, a few bits of tears at the corner of his eyes. Ashiro was looking away, trying to hide his tears, while Ranjiku grabbed the back of his Haori and used it as a handkerchief. Mayuri was a mix of emotions. On one hand hand he saw potential in experimenting on the blonde on the other hand. His natural inborn nature said it was touching. Nemu was smiling as she looked away to hide the happy tears. Ishiro was smiling as he wiped away the coming tears while Keen and Sentaro were openly crying. Daisen, Jin, and Kanem were having their thoughts rather than showing their emotions. He might prove useful in my war against Asirate. Ah, quite interesting. Aizen-sama will probably want to use him. He is so young and so scared. Kanem looked at the family of two and wondered, what paths have you walked, Naruto? Naruto and Soifin finally stopped sobbing and simply held each other in their arms. They slowly began to drift off. Sajin and Kenpachi assisted in picking up the two of them and placed them on a bed. Retsu tucked the two of them in and patted both of their heads. The group left and allowed the mother and her child to sleep for once in each other's arms. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.